So I choose to observe the lesson that was linked in the assignment, and the types of questions that were used were mostly scripturally implicit questions, because these students were using prior knowledge and knowledge from the book to answer their teacher's question. Also, convergent questions were involved because most students' answers were similar or the same to each other. And then just some different types of questions that I know: probing questions, specific questions, review questions, which were questions in relation to what he had just read. So he would, read the page and then he would ask immediately, whatever was on the page. And then inferring through reading, which was, again, he might say, that, snow happens when it's what outside? Okay, it's cold outside, so there could be snow that gets really cold and then the kids would say ice or something like that. And then the comprehensibility of the questions, they were reviewing parts of the book, and he was asking students with choral response. So most of them were all answering at the same time. And then he seemed to have discussed this with the students before. So he did that chart where it was, what do we know about weather? What are some misconceptions? Things like that. So they, kind of knew some of the things. So it seemed to be pretty comprehensive. They were able to comprehend most of it. There was not much wait time needed between him asking the question and then the students answering. Most of them recalled information from past learned information. And then the options for answering was really, all of them had the option because they did choral response throughout, and they called the answer out if they knew it. And then the relation of the question to the learning goals, they went back to referencing schema at the beginning. So they used their schema throughout the reading of the book. And then the teacher asked the questions, students answered. This was just a short whole group lesson, so, about 20 minutes was the amount of class time involved in this lesson. And then the balance of the type of the questions for different students, they were really pretty simple questions, mostly because they were referring back to information that they knew. And then also pictures gave some answers for the book, pictures gave some answers for most of the book, and a lot of the questions were guided questions. And then moving on to the second question in relation to the information in this chapter, would you characterize the types of questions you asked during reading as optimal? I would say that the questions were mostly, they were pretty optimal. Some questions I think the teacher asked to keep students engaged, maybe, when he would ask a question and then he would have them finish the answer or instead of asking a question, he would say something and have them finish it. I think that was sort of to keep them engaged at times. And then other questions were asked to help students to understand the concept and more things about weather. And then at the beginning, he talked about what do we know about weather? What do we want to know about weather? What are some misconceptions about weather? So that brings in the KWL model that you can use for learning. And there was a lot of retelling throughout the story, so he would read the page and then he would have them kind of reiterate what was on the page. And then moving on to chapter 4, the question asked, to identify important school performances that may be the focus of a performance assessment in relation to your personal goals for students and state and district goals. So for that, one performance students had to do weekly for me was progress monitoring. So this showed me or parents or anyone who needed to know the students' progress. It showed us how they were doing and what they were progressing in weekly. And I personally wanted these students who were being progress monitored to grow weekly. So if they were having to, read CVC words, if they got 14 in a minute the week before, I would love for them to get 15 the week after, because that just shows that they've grown. And now that test is not something that I personally have chosen to give them. It's something that the state has required. But I do think that it's a great thing because it shows us what they have learned with things that they needed to specifically learn more about. it was just a way that we could see the different abilities each week as they grew. And then another one that we used was guided reading assessments. At the beginning of the year, I would test students individually to see if they were reading at grade level, or if they were reading below grade level or above grade level. And then in December, I would test again. And then at the end of the year, I would test again. So I would give it 3 times. And then, a state and district goal was that students be at a certain reading level by the end of the year. So I taught second grade. So your hopes was that they came in on a second grade reading level and they left at the end of the year being on a third grade reading level. So this was just a performance assessment that I valued as well, because it showed how much reading growth each student made throughout the year, whether it be that grade level or more if they ended up being, reading on a 4th grade level. So those were 2 performance assessments that I really liked that we did.